Good, perfect. I'm Frank Conkling. This is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Workshop. And today what we're going to do is we're going to go over tips and tricks for remonumentation projects. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple different techniques. This isn't comprehensive analysis. This is just some of the things that are built into ArcGIS Pro that you might be able to go and utilize for a remonumentation project. All right, so let's look here at the initial data that we're going to be looking at. I have a copy of some data up in Wisconsin. They've recently gone through and done some remonumentation. And while the remonumentation is not intensive, this is a fairly small adjustment to here. It's still about 1/2 foot. And that's often problematic. And we want to go and look at and show you some of the techniques for doing that. If we go and look at the other side of this, we see we've got something similar to that also. And again, just to go and measure this real quickly, this is not very big. This displacement here, only about, a 1.5 foot, but it's something that we want to at least look at, because this, as you bring new control in, as you bring new monumentation in, you want to recognize that things have to be adjusted, and they should be adjusted. Now, some of these adjustments are fairly simple. Others are not going to be quite as simple. So we're just going to look at them. And we'll look at, again, as I said, a couple of techniques to go and do this. One technique, and the one that I really like, is the use of either scratch layers or construction layers, something that provides you with the ability to not necessarily impact the parcel fabric right away, but allows you to test out some scenarios on here. So on here, we actually will have gone and created 2 feature classes here, one called construction lines, one called construction polygons. The construction lines, just to let you know, actually, basically, it's just standard lines. There's no real attribution on here other than the standard Coco attribution. And you'll note, because these are number fields, that this is ArcGIS Pro Coco enabled. Same way with the polygons. There's no real attribution. This is the standard. We don't have a name field. We don't have anything. This is purely to go and construct sort of polygons, to test them out. And you're actually going to see that we can use those polygons to do some rebuilds, only because the way that we can go through them is much easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to use these construction layers, and I'll look at possibly creating and breaking down the new section in here. And I've already segregated my table of contents. So when I go and turn off this one layer, it's a group layer that contains all of the features inside of my parcel fabric. So I'm not doing anything with those. Instead, I'm just dealing with these construction layers and my control points here. So I have enabled mapping, or enabled editing on here. And I'm going to go over and start by just drawing some construction lines. And I'll get in here, and I know, by the way, this pattern here that you see, this was when the original lines were converted over. They actually had a circle or some sort of symbology around them. And that's what you're seeing there, is that symbology. Then I'm going to go around here and go out here. By the way, I should have pointed this out, what section I'm actually working in here. And I'll do this before I build anything else out, just so we're aware of it. Make sure I'm going into the same one here. And there's my section on here. Now, if I turn this on real quickly, we'll be able to see that In fact, this is section 23 in a township, which means that it's not around the edge of a township. It's not a closing section up in the top tier of sections, nor on the western tier of sections. So this is probably as close to a normal section as we can get. And again, I'm going to turn that off. So this is all in section 23. And I now have some options on what I can do. I can take these lines, selecting these lines. I can take these lines and do a construct polygon from these lines onto construction polygons using these 3 lines in here. Tell it to go ahead and construct that. That will be constructing my polygon for me. If I go ahead and select that polygon, just to see on the attributes, there it is. Oh, this is only 165 acres, which means that probably is not the full section, even though going in here and looking and seeing this is not a full section here. So I should probably go over, and this is section over here too. Let's turn off those layers and let's go and build out this full thing. So I'm going to go back here to edit, and I'm going to delete everything that I had just created, and I'm going to create a new one. This time, instead of building the lines first, I think I'm going to go and build construction polygons. All right. And I'm going to start here at this point.
Hey, Frank, this is Ryan. You're just drawing the north half of the section by going across like that.
Is that the north half of that section? Thank you.
Yeah, so you just drew the northeast quarter when you did that one.
Let me see when this 23. So you're right. This is 23 here. 23 here. 23. So you're right. This is the east-west quarter section line on here. Thank you. Start this again. Start here. And you can see there is a little bit more adjustment here. Here again. I can turn this off now. Thank you for pointing that out, Ryan.
No problem.
Right, and we were sharing a conversation before we started, and Ryan was sharing that he's doing himself a whole lot of remonumentation up in St. Louis County. And all of Minnesota, it's my understanding, right?
Yeah, we're trying.
So one of the things that we can do if we want to is right now, let me finish this out, is that if we wanted to, we could actually go and take our points. And by the way, our points are classified as our control points and our other points. We could actually just go and create our own temporary layer, just having control points on it. And just sort of to show you how to do that, I could copy this layer and just put it up here and paste it in. Let's turn off those points off. And then I could go and into the properties of this points layer, I can go and set up a definition query that says that only go and Let's use this fixed. I think they've got a modification to it now. Preserve is equal to yes. Now this will only show us the control points on here. That's under, and this is a parcel fabric that has been upgraded, I believe. This is a 2.6 parcel fabric. It's not a 2.7 one yet, so 2.6. So we go ahead and just have it set up so that it only shows us the constrained or the control points on here, just by creating a copy of that feature class. All right, so let's go and check again and verify. And this is 657 acres, which is more realistic for what we're going to be doing now. So now the next breakdown on this would be to go and break it down into quarters at least. And how are we going to do that? By using just a standard split tool, we could then go and interactively go and do it. In this case, because we're selecting it one at a time, we're going to uncheck this and make sure that it's completely unchecked. And we can go in here and tell it, go ahead and to this. This is the center of section. I'm assuming that someone's located the center of section, even though theoretically the surveyor never went and set that original monument. I'm then going to go over here and do this, so that rather than doing it twice, I'm just doing it one time, and it goes and splits them into my individual quarter sections on here. Now, again, these are construction polygons. These are temporary in nature. All right. If I go in here, let's go and take on here and put some transparency on here, just so we can see if there's something underneath it. All right, and we can see that, for example, this underneath here, we have got the quarter. So this is the northwest quarter of section 23. This is the northeast of the northwest, the southeast of the northwest. This is the southwest and the northwest of the northwest. I'm going to go and turn off those underlying layers and break this section, this quarter section down, also using that same technique. Sorry. On here. And one of the things I want to make sure of is that, again, my snapping is turned on so that it's going to snap to the midpoint of that line that's in there. All right. So now I go back here to modify. I go to split, first make a selection. Then I can go ahead and tell it what I want to split. So I can start outside of my, and as I move this through, this should be theoretically the midpoint of that quarter section between the two. Let me go in and put this big caveat here. This is a theoretic breakdown. All right. If in fact you have a sectional breakdown or you have sectional information from a surveyor that tells you exactly where that corner is, use that. Don't do this. So if you have a sectional breakdown that has a complete breakdown, use that. This is a mapping breakdown more than anything else. So again, just a reminder, I still have it. So I have to have a selection before I can break this down. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to draw it through to here. And because it only will break down the one that I have actually got selected, I can go over here and say, now go to here and go to here. And I can double click outside and it will break down the entire section at that point also. Let me go again just to look and see. And it doesn't look like it's that far off, but there is some differences in this as far as the breakdown that goes on here. Now, as I'm going through, there's also other information here. For example, this is some sort of an aliquot description where it goes over. I can't do that without actually looking at that description and doing that. But I'm going to go and do a marginal one here, just so you understand what this is. If I go in here and do a measure on here, and again, this is imprecise, but I want to just make sure that we know that this looks like this is 403, so maybe it's a 400-foot offset here. We can also do a breakdown of an aliquot breakdown using the standard tools inside of ArcMap by using the divide tool. The divide tool will allow us to go, let's go back here to divide. It will allow us to take a selected polygon and do a division against that. So I can go and tell it to go an equal width in which I want to go 400 feet. And I get to tell it what side it's coming from. So I can tell it this side. And when I click divide, it will go and divide that up and create an aliquot breakdown of that section. Again, all in a temporary polygon. And as I turn my old layers on, I can go in here and do a quick comparison to where that is and go from there. There's other, seems like some other aliquot, maybe right-of-way takings or something in here. We can go and perform also. Again, we need to know what these are. The CSMs, I would actually go and break down completely by going and looking at the CSM and actually rebuilding a CSM. CSM brings up an interesting point when we're doing breakdowns and we're doing remonumentations. And it gets a little sticky here in that the actual location of a CSM is dependent upon the monumentation that was used to build it. So if you've got a CSM that was recorded at a certain date and used an original monument, and I use these terms lightly, where the monument was in the wrong place, all right? You've got some remonumentation that says, oh, no, the sectional breakdown, the monument should have been over here. Even though you know that there's a new location for that monument, that CSM from a legal standpoint doesn't move. The CSM stays wherever the original monuments were when that CSM was created. And I can tell you that brings up all sorts of issues when you're looking at moving or trying to remap what may have been done with monuments that were, what they were originally placed at. For this reason, I highly recommend you don't delete old monumentation. You keep it in there and you do some attribution on it to tell it maybe what it was, or maybe some attribution on your CSM to say, when was this monument used, or what monument was used for that CSM. So let's look at this area again here. We've not done any breakdown in this area. Let's go and break down the quarters and then the east and west halves of this on here also. All right, let's go in here again. We're going to do a split on this, and we're going to go and use the intersection tool and the snapping to go halves. In this case, we're going to go to that point again. We're going to go half here. And again, you want to make sure that you've got good survey information. If it's available, use that. Don't do this type of a breakdown. But if you have nothing available, all you have is the actual monumentation or the remonumentation, utilize that. Now here, we also have underneath here, again, if we look, we have the east and west halves of this northwest of the northeast on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this again. And again, here to half, to half, to half, and split it there also so that we can go and break it down that way. And by zooming in, we can see there is a slight difference in here. Was that caused by the remonumentation or just some mapping? You're not quite sure. Let's go and measure from here to here. That's 2 feet difference. So it depends upon the external monumentation on there. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and ask, and you can put them in the chat window, or you can go and in which Christopher will go and describe it for me, or you can go and just turn on your audio and ask any questions. Are there any questions yet as far as how you might use a temporary construction layer to go and build and to remap sections and the results of remonumentation?
Hey, Frank, this is Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
As you know, I've been using redraw layers for years now in our parcel fabric.
Right.
And I actually have it broken out so each individual parcel type has its own redraw feature layer. That way I can take my time and redraw sections and townships and keep them kind of separate and keep checking on them as I do things.
Right.
So I have individual construction layers for each parcel type.
And that's actually not a bad idea. One of the good things about that is you can then, as you're building them, you can actually take their attribution over there and you can transfer the attribution. With this technique, this is just sort of one construction layer and that's it. That's all that we were doing on here. But yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Especially if you're looking to migrate and move some of the attribution that's out there for it.
Yep. So my redraw features are identical to my production features, as I call them. Attribute wise, I can just, like I said, just transfer them over when I'm done. Make them live, as I call them.
Right. So you're still using the ArcMap Parcel Fabric. So
Yep.
Are you just transferring or just modifying that type field?
Yeah, that's all I'm doing at this point. Yep.
Yeah. So in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, and again, I'm not using any parcel fabric, but in there, I would then go and use the change parcel type function to go and do that, where it goes and I could take a selected parcel. If I built this out as separate temporary types, I could then go and say, well, take this one and change the parcel type and make it a valid one, a current one, a rebuilt one, if you will. So I can use that. I wouldn't have to use the duplicate parcels. I could use the change parcel type if I did it that way on here. Again, one of the reasons why I do this is that as I'm just building polygons, it doesn't matter whether I'm building a subdivision polygon or a quarter polygon or a special survey type polygon. I could just take that polygon and copy and paste it into a record and then use the parcel fabric to finish building this on there. So there's some thought to this, but this is a faster or quicker way to go and build this. One of the interesting things about this is that I've not done any lines at all in this second sort of example. What I'm doing, none of these have lines on them. So how do I build lines on them? I can go in here and just take, for example, this parcel, and I can do a copy and then paste it special into my construction lines on here. Again, it goes and pops up on move automatically. And if I look at this is a single line that's built there, but I can use then the update Coco, or actually it's the split into Coco lines tool that's built into 2.7, and I can tell it to go ahead and build these lines and split them all up and create Coco parcel or Coco lines out of them. And it goes and creates all these Coco lines for me, if you see. And they have directions and distance built into them when I go and do the split into Coco lines on here, that function. So I use the polygons to build sort of the outer geometry of this. And this way I'm sure that I don't have any intermediate points that I have to deal with or that I'm looking at. And it's only once I've done the complete breakdown that I'm then going to start looking at, okay, let's copy these over. Let's create Coco lines out of them as we move forward with that. Any questions or anything on that yet? No. All right. So let's look here. That's basically creating and breaking down a new section. And this is using temporary construction lines and construction polygons for that. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about realignments. And how do we possibly do realignments in here? And I'm going to go back to this section that I just broke down and go from here so we can see what's going on here. I do have all the other points turned on now. I've got all my other layers turned on here. If I really want to do this well, I will turn on all of my historic elements in here also as I'm going through this. Notice on the table of contents, we have our PLSS group broken down so it's a separate group layer so we can turn them on and off depending upon how we're building this. So the next thing I want to do is I really want to go and take and just do a really fast breakdown. Let's get out of here, out of this tool, and make sure that we just have one polygon selected. There's our construction polygon. Now the tool that I will use for this is the Align Features tool. All right, the Align Features tool, I'll go ahead and use it, and depending upon how far away this was on here, I'll go and I'll set a, for example, a 10-foot tolerance on this. So by default, and the reason why I selected this is by default, the tool goes to trace as the standard. And again, because I'm not quite sure why it won't let me go and use, because these are not parcels. I don't have a parcel selected now. But I'm just going to go and do this and do a trace. Sorry. I'm going to go and trace it along. And I'll just trace it there. Turn my parcels back on. Now, one of the things that we want to be careful of is with the Align Parcels tool, and this is, by the way, again, 2.7 that I'm working on. As soon as I click on the Parcel Fabric tool, or excuse me, the Align Features tool, the topology kicks in. And I should have gone and turned it off in the beforehand. When I turn it off, it makes me go and redraw my path. Let's go here also, at least to there. And let's turn on my parcel layers again. I have no topology on there. So why do I turn on no topology with this? If it turns out that there is a small sliver of a line that would be eliminated as part of this Align Features, I want to make sure that it's not going to give me a warning that it's going to go and remove that line. I want it to go ahead and remove that. So we can go ahead and tell it to go ahead and align this. And if I look in here, it went and aligned everything to this. Let's go ahead and undo this so we can see the difference. There's the difference. There's the realigned over to there. All right. Any questions on that? One of the techniques you will see me using here quite often is that I will have this construction line or construction polygon, and I'll use a trace on that more than anything else. And I'm going to show you why here in a minute. So this is,
Frank,
yes,
does it leave the node that was there originally?
it does. Well, it depends upon how we've done this, and we're going to show it on some of the other elements on here. It goes and does that. Before we leave this, I want to go and show you another little trick on this. And I'm going to go and specifically, let's go and measure and make sure that we know what we have here. Many of the roads are 33 feet wide on here. So if I want to, I know now that the center line, the road center line is moved over by that realignment, but it has done nothing to this road alignment at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and draw the alignment again, and I'm going to leave it at 10 feet. And I'm going to do a trace. All right. And I'm going to turn this off so that I'm only tracing. And I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'll only do to here. And as I do that, when I right click while I'm in the middle of a trace, and I should have done it before the trace, it has trace options where I can actually tell it to trace with an offset. So I can tell it to trace 33 feet over from my path. All right. So when I do that, and again, let me go up here and continue with a trace. Notice where it's drawing the line. It's actually drawing the line over 33 feet. Now with this, I can also tab. When I hit tab now, trace, and I can tab it, and it goes to the other side of my trace. Again, I was sloppy here. I should have done a whole new one here. Let me turn these layers back on again. And it's going to do some realignment in here. And note, this is not a 33 feet on this side. This looks like it's 50 feet here, but this is a 33 foot here. And I can go and tell it, go ahead and realign. And it went, and not only did I originally realign my road center lines, my PLSS lines, but I also can realign things that are parallel to that by utilizing the trace and the offset on there to go and do that. So if I consider this even further, I could go down. By the way, I messed up this area here because of the trace, and I understand that. So if that's the case, could I actually go and, if this is a, this is probably 200 feet, could I use that same concept of doing a trace And before I start my trace, tell it I want it to be 200 feet offset. And if I'm looking where I'm going here, I can now actually do complete aliquot realignments off of this new realign section line by going and using the trace command along that newly realigned section line and tell it to go ahead and trace and realign that aliquot section there. So I use the align feature tool to go and draw the path. And in this case, I did a trace with no offset to go and do that. And it realigned that road center line for me. Then I did a trace with an offset for 33 feet. And I told it to then go and realign so it's parallel with the road center line, which is that section line in this case. And I realigned the road right of way. Then I said, let me look at aliquot breakdowns and let's realign the property line here. So I could realign this line using a trace offset from that one breakdown line. Any questions or comments on that? I thought that was genius. I thought that was pretty amazing what we're doing here. All right, the next thing I want to do. Any other comments on that?
Nothing in the chat right now.
Nothing. Okay. So let me turn off my construction layers now. We're done with that discussion. And let's look at some of the new tools that have been put in place in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. Again, this is 2.7, but I'm working against a 2.6 Parcel Fabric. So it hasn't been fully upgraded. And there's some new tools in 2.7 that are really nice. There's a merge boundaries tool, which is basically it merges collinear parcel boundaries. And there's a merge points tool. So let me go and select these lines here. These lines that I've selected, and let's go to the attributes and see there's points, there's one parcel line, 2 tax parcels. I don't care about those as long as I have lines. But the reason why I go over and look at what I've selected is the merge boundaries tool inside of 2.7 requires that I make the change to every set of lines that I'm working on. So if this was a section line, I would have to go and also update the tax parcel lines plus the section lines or whatever lines. You can only do one layer at a time. So let me go in here to my tax lines and tell it to go ahead and eliminate the points in here. All right, let's go and clear this out. I still see some points. Let's select them and see they are not associated with anything now, so I can go ahead and delete them. To prove that, let's go ahead and rebuild this extent. And it eliminates it. Questions? What did it do with the Coco information? The answer is it did nothing. It wiped out the Coco information for this. So if I go in here and look at this, it did not add them up. It did not do anything else with them. And let me make sure I'm not a liar here. It wasn't doing it earlier. If I update the Coco on here, tell it to just overwrite this. Well, it did actually go and update this. So let's go and do that here. Let's take this line. Got 2 lines. There's actually, it doesn't look like there's any Coco on those lines, but let's calculate Coco just to make sure. So there's the Coco values for those lines. Let's go ahead and label this on here. Let's make sure that this is labeling. Now let's just do distances. All right. And let's go and turn this on all the time. There we go. There's our Coco distances on here. Let's go ahead to our quality. Let's merge the boundaries on this. Again, you have to go and tell it what layer these things are on. And by the way, this offset boundary is if you've got a bend in there, it will straighten it out. In this case, I'm just using the default of 1/2 of a meter. I can set it whatever I want. Offset from the connected lines for it to be considered collinear. I'm just going to go ahead and say, go ahead and apply that. All right. So now go back here and select this line again. Go to the attributes, and sure enough, let's clear this out. Sure enough, it has no Coco on it. So I didn't think it was updating the Coco. You still have to go in here and update the Coco because the merge boundaries does not, it basically just overwrites anything that's in there on there for you. So just be aware of that. Try it again. Take these two lines, go to merge boundaries, tell it it is tax lines. Say, go ahead and apply this. Get out of here. It still has a single line, but that point is no longer a valid point. We can actually delete that point, and we can take this one line and then go and update the Coco on it. It's actually a nice tool. I wish that an enhancement in this is I wish that they would go and have it automatically recalculate Coco if in fact there is Coco values on here. Now, optimally, what they really want to do is have it not just recalculate the Coco, but if you have stored Coco on there, let it go and aggregate the two values, and so that you don't have a calculated value, but you have whatever the needed information might be against there. All right. This is actually a very nice tool on here, and it will go and eliminate any sort of interior or what we used to call pseudonodes in your data. Let's look here. Again, this has two tax lines on it. We can say merge the boundaries on it and go to tax lines and say, okay. And we'll go and merge them. If we select them again, we can go to attributes and say, delete this point. And then go to our lines and update the Coco on them. All right, it's a good way to clean up pseudonodes on here. We're doing it one at a time. If we have multiple lines, okay, multiple lines in here, we can go and actually, it's not what I want to do. I want to do this. Why does it not let me do that? Interesting. All right. Let me go back now. One more thing I'd like to show you today. And this is, nope, not there. there's a new tool where if you have multiple points in here, I can go in here using, again, some of the quality driven workflow here. I can actually do a merge points in which I select a series of lines in here, and it goes and it analyzes each of these points in here. And it gives you the option of which of the points you want to go and preserve. So as I click on a different point, you'll see that where the lines will move, the lines will move, the lines will move. Well, it turns out that there's some intelligence built in here. In this case, I had a control point located here, and this would allow me to go and utilize the control point and tell it to go and eliminate and merge out those points that are in there and redraw the lines as one single line to that new control point on there. And that will go and modify not just the lines, not just the points and get rid of those points, but it also will go and redraw the polygons on there. So if I look at this, it now has eliminated that. Unfortunately, it drew the line from here to here, so I still have an issue with this, and that's part of the remonumentation I'm going to have to deal with. The other thing you want to watch out for is the fact if you look at this dimension as we roll it back, you can see that this dimension, it took this one, but it just dropped this one here. So it did not recalculate the distance for this. It did not actually logically merge these lines as well as it could have. You're still going to have to go back in there and recalculate or update the Coco values for that line in there. So go in here and let's do that. And you can see it now there. All right, so what we did so far today is we showed you how to go and rebuild section from new monumentation, then take that rebuilt section and do some breakdowns on it. Do some aliquot breakdowns, break it into quarters, quarters, break it into halves and such. Those of you that are in colonial areas aren't going to have to deal with that, but in the rectangular survey areas, you do. And then what we did is we looked at how do you go, once you've got your new sectional breakdown, how do you go and look at realigning, for example, your road center lines, your section lines that you already have there by using the feature align or align feature tool. Then we looked at the rights of way and other sort of offset areas by using the align features tool with a trace offset so that we could show how you could go in and do that. And then we went to look at the merge boundaries so that we could eliminate interim points. Again, what we used to call pseudonodes in coverages. We could eliminate those by using the merge boundaries tool and what it did and what it didn't do. And then finally, what we did is we used the merge points to go and remove excessive points in our database on here. I think we covered quite a bit today. So I'm going to open this up. Does anybody have any questions? Anything we want to go and talk about or explain a little bit more? So is there a limit, for example, in here, what would I do with this? Would I do a merge boundaries to eliminate this interim point? Or would I do a merge points on here to go and do that? In some instances, there's not a whole lot of difference in here. What merge boundary does, merge boundary basically just takes the lines and takes out those interim points from it. Merge points, however, is much more intensive in what it's doing. And that merge points is actually going and removing that small segment and extending the line over to it. Now, there's one more thing here called simplify by straight lines. And this tool also would allow you to go and do it, and allows you to go and do it on your tax lines, but also on your tax polygons in here. And you can tell it the amount of offset and whether or not to create circles. Let's do a 0.5 meters in here, preserve the endpoints, and let's see what happens with this. This appeared to do the same thing. Let's see if we can. We have the 1 point in here. Let's delete that point. Let's go and rebuild this area to see if there's anything in here that winds up getting built back again. It did. It did get built back. So that's not going to go and do us much good. We can do a merge boundaries on here with tax lines. Go ahead and do that. Take and eliminate our point. Delete it. And then let's build the extent again. Brought it in again. So now maybe we do a merge point in here. And tell it to go ahead and merge to that. Now let's do a build extent again. And the point did not come back. Let's make sure about that. The point did not come back on here. So there's 3 different options that we looked at, some of which were more successful than others on here, in making sure that the points, those dastardly points, don't come back all the time, and going through here. All right. Let's try this one more time. Let's move these here. Do merge points on here. That dark blue line is the preview, which tells us what it's going to look like. Just be aware that it did not update any of the Coco on here. And then we can go in here and build this extent again. See, and if we are smart, we'll probably go and update the Coco on these lines so that we know what the real Coco is on them. All right. Merge boundaries, merge points, and thank you for joining. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. By the way, next week, we have Nancy von Meyer. She's going to talk about the new nationwide parcel project. Thank you, everybody, for coming. All right. Thanks again. Bye. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.